So today is also another passion of mine. This is really fun. You know what's weird? You write these essays, you post them on Facebook years ago, and now I'm rereading them. Some of them really for the first time since we edited this book. And it's good to be reminded with what's out there. So you can always go back through Facebook and see everything that we've broadcast, posted. Occasionally someone will share one of my posts from years ago. And literally all of these are also on the blog. So if you have friends who haven't been on Facebook and you want to acquaint them with one concept, you can just go look up any one of these essays from the book, A Gracious Space, on the blog.bravewriter.com, and you'll find it and you can share it, and they don't even have to be a Facebook person. And all of these Facebook Lives are on YouTube. Hey, Bobby, welcome. First time here. Everybody who's a first timer, post in the comments because I will make a personal connection with you. All right, so let's do it. Thanks. Everybody's here, I think. Day 30, pass on your expertise. The best education you can give your kids is in the area of your expertise. Sometimes we diminish the value of our skills because we worry so much about the areas where we are weak. We think endlessly about how to teach math and research all the methods because we lack confidence. Suddenly, math becomes the most important school subject ever. We forget to make time to teach our kids to quilt because, heck, we are quilters and it's not that difficult. It must not matter. But the thing is, if you're a quilter, think of the amazing skill set you'd pass on to both your girls and your boys. I remember one of my friends taught her sons to quilt. She had no daughters. And these 12 and 14-year-old boys would get up to work on their quilts even before going off to school each morning. They weren't even homeschooled. It's really hard to pass on a love of a subject you don't love yourself. It's hard to teach a skill that you don't possess. But it's surprisingly easy to impart what you do know and love. Your family can have its own trajectory, its own flavor, based on what you share that is particularly amazing and cool about who you are. Obviously, in my family, a love of wordplay is chief among our values. We've cultivated fans of the bard, kids who can deconstruct poems, who write well and frequently, who use technology with ease, and who are passionate about human rights in foreign languages. We have kids who care about nutrition and who can steep a pot of tea with the best of them. We've not successfully imparted plumbing or hanging drywall or car repair or surfing. But you might be able to. I have friends who have taught their kids how to completely remodel a home, from wiring to knocking out walls to laying tile to instilling carpet. What a gift. I know a family where cooking is the optimal expression of togetherness. One of these kids went off to college and his chief pleasure is shopping and cooking for his friends. I know families who hunt, who examine and care for wildlife, who rescue pets, who volunteer in nursing homes, who are political activists, who use math every day in real life, practical, engineering ways, and the kids are, as a result, naturals at it. That is not my family. I know families where dissections and experiments are the most enlivening part of home education. Being good at what you're good at is the right place to start. Keep your talents going. If you are artistic, why wouldn't you devote a big chunk of your homeschooling time to painting, drawing, sculpting, and designing? What a gift you might give your children, one we all will and do envy. Those hours spent doing that effortless for you stuff absolutely should take some time in the day that you might be tempted to use for other harder for you to impart subjects. Absolutely. Pass on what you know. A foreign language, photography, building a deck, training a pet, baking pies, sewing clothes, finishing the basement, landscaping the yard, playing tennis, reading widely, watching classic films, appreciating art, knowing the history of rock and roll, playing the piano, fashion, healthy living, a love of writing, a love of gaming, a love for marginalized people, identifying birds, travel, saving money, starting a business, organizing groups, household management, building a website, cooking, knowledge of the law, hanging holiday lights, shopping for good deals, recycling, surfing, skiing, swimming, running, hiking, naming the natural world, arranging flowers, plumbing, carpentry, crafting, gardening. I didn't even include playing musical instruments, which is a huge one for a lot of families. Any of these and more are worthy of your time. Invest in your kids by passing on your expertise. It's the quickest path to wonderful family bonding and to that distinct family identity you wish to cultivate. Families have generational habits of thought and practice that are passed on through your intentional instruction and your incidental sharing of enthusiasm. Don't feel guilty about what you lack. Feel inspired. You get to lead your children into the world of your competencies. And that's just plain fun. Quote of the day. This is so awesome. Being a former sign maker and graphic designer for 17 years, I have taught my kids some of my skills and they love it. Tonight, I was just contemplating about showing them more. Thanks for posting this. I will make it a goal to load Corel Draw into my kids' computers and let them fully explore the program. Lena Tardif Simpson. Sustaining thought. Just think. Your kids can carry on your hobbies, passions, and your professions too if you share your expertise with them. Then watch them soar, maybe even pass you up. Yeah, so people are already posting ways that they are focusing on these experiences in their families, which I love, love, love seeing. So keep doing that, because in this thread, we can build up a long list of all the ways that your family is creating a family identity and culture around what you are already good at. And I think it's really helpful to be stimulated to remember we tend to devalue what we're naturally good at and overvalue what is difficult for us. So if your family is much more inclined to the great outdoors, then don't worry so much about having mastered the indoors. Like, that is two different worlds for your family, and you can get what you need about education by really maximizing either travel or hiking or camping, knowing the natural world. One of the things that I think is easy for homeschoolers is to constantly revert to, but how does this help with school subjects? I would like to make this suggestion. When you have a natural affinity, like in my case, writing, it is easy sometimes to forget all the ways that writing helps me with the other subjects. I sort of think it's in this narrow niche, right? It's just one category. But people who write well can use writing in a variety of ways. I remember, for example, when Johanna was struggling to remember the practices that we had delineated around multiplication, finding common denominators, how to handle fractions. We had her write the rules for herself on note cards because writing was easy for her. So we used writing to we leveraged writing to help her with math. And the same can go with math. You could read books, like next month in the Arrow for November, we're doing Carry On Mr. Bowditch, which, I moved the book. I had it sitting here. I was going to show it to you. Yeah, it moved. Sorry. Anyway, we are doing Carry On Mr. Bowditch. And Carry On Mr. Bowditch is all about Nathaniel Bowditch, who uses math to rewrite all of the tables for nighttime navigation by boat across the sea, before we had computers. And his love of math is evident throughout that book. So if you have a child who doesn't like math, maybe starting with what they love, a really good historical fiction book, novel, would draw them in or help them see the relationship. Is it behind me on the table? That's a different one. It's blue, and I just had it. I was just using it. I don't know what I did. My house is topsy-turvy. I'm trying to pack. Yeah, I love Carry On Mr. Bowditch. It was one of my favorite books when I was young, reading to my kids. Now, I know there are some families who say they found it boring, so you just have to read the books that feel great to you, because there are way too many books in the world to put your family through a book that's tedious. Just drop it, guilt-free, and move on, okay? Read books that you enjoy. Do not read books that you should read, because there's nothing that kills a love of reading faster than that. But leverage the things you're good at. So you might discover, for example, that there's a lot of math in cooking and in quilting and in carpentry. So if any of those are natural skill sets for your family, jump in. I remember Katrin really wanted to get into fashion, and I had forgotten, because it had been years, about my sewing machine. So I went and I got my sewing machine out of my bathroom, and wouldn't you know, or closet, bathroom, they're kind of the same thing. I got it out for her, and it was around the same time that Project Runway started on television. So we started watching Project Runway. She started sewing. I resurrected my skills in quilting, and we did that together. And then she outstripped my skill set, because I never was a great seamstress. I did it mostly for pleasure. I never got into it the way true quilters do. Well, I have a friend who's a quilter, and she started a sewing class, and Katrin took sewing. So part of her homeschool day was sitting at the, at the sewing machine making things. And she made all kinds of stuff. And it isn't even still a skill she's continued to this day, but during this nice chunk of time, during her early life, between ages of 9 and about 13, she sewed, and sewed most days, and really enjoyed it. So don't forget that even if it's something that doesn't last forever, you are giving them a valuable skill. She isn't intimidated by sewing. She has that now as a resource to her as an adult. And I think that's fantastic. The same thing about, what do you have here? Oh, Ashley says, Julie, my son is doing Greek and loves it. We found some funny songs, I want to read this, about ancient Greek on YouTube, and he loves this topic. Oh, yes. That's the other thing. You've also got YouTube available to you. So any skill that your child is struggling with and you're not the expert, go find some experts who are passionate about it. There is one woman whose name is escaping me, some of you will remember, who does all kinds of stuff with math, folding origami and calculating, and her videos are incredible. So sometimes just putting them in touch with someone else who's an expert, rather than you just limping along in your lack of expertise, is a way to pull in other dynamics. But you don't have to do that. You can focus a lot of your energy on what your family is naturally excited about and things that you and your spouse have already cultivated as skill sets. One of my friends from high school / college, she was my freshman roommate. She was a sociology major in college, but my joke with her is that she really wasn't. She was actually really a surfing major. We went to UCLA. She had one of those Volkswagen vans, and literally every morning before school would get up in Westwood, drive out to PCH, and go surfing in Santa Monica, and then go to school. Today, as an adult, my age, she produces documentaries about surfing, women who surf, women in the waves. Her name is Heather Hudson. And I've watched her go from, kind of a mild disinterest in college to becoming this professional filmmaker. She's also active in an organization that is about saving the ocean, which is logical, right? Surfing is her core passion. So sometimes we think, if I let them just do this thing and it's their core passion and it doesn't have anything to do with academics, they won't find a fulfilling career, when the exact opposite might be true. It's possible that surfing can provide you with your career. And in her case, it did. She did some other things before she actually started making these films, but surfing has been a daily part of her life for as long as I've known her. She relocated to Santa Barbara, and that's where she lives, and that's what she does. So, yes, it was V. Hart for math. Christina, thank you. V. Hart. She's incredible. So that's what I wanted to share with you is take that passion you have. You can pass it on to your kids or pay attention to the passions they've already got and give them full exercise of those passions, because you really don't know where it will lead. You don't know what is the best. Is it best to study sociology or pursue surfing? Well, she ended up bringing them together and thinking about the relationship between women and the history of surfing, which is a sociological perspective, is it not? Because it's always been kind of an old boys club. and she's trying to bring better attention to the history of surfing for women and what it does to empower them. So think about the way all of education intersects with each other. I noticed someone, oh, Jennifer says, oh, hi, Jennifer. It's fun to see you. The most fulfilled adults she knows followed their passions. That's right. And you're an example of that. You should post what you do. That's awesome. I love that. One of the things that you can realize even in your own family is that as you take in different philosophies of education, and I saw someone mentioned Charlotte Mason, they have some groups have an extreme insistence that their kids read books that are way beyond their capability. I might add, they're also way outside of the current stream of writing and also what passes for quality material. So just because something is old does not make it superior. Just because a book was written a long time ago and uses what feels like more erudite language, you need to remember the quote flowery language was more current then. Language continues to evolve. Self-expression continues to evolve. And just because something sounds more sophisticated doesn't mean it's better writing. I don't know if you know that. I think this is a worthwhile point to camp on for a moment because I see it happen so frequently. If you ever learn a foreign language, so for example, if you learn French, one of the ways that they speak is they use words that we in English, if you take the cognate, so for example, we might say the word sympathetic. They will say sympathétique. My French is terrible. Used to be awesome, now it's terrible. They will take that word that for us, sympathetic, and they use that to mean the same thing as nice. It's a more formal version of our word. But in their language, it's not formal. It's just the word they use that means that. If you can do this with English and remember that when you're reading Jane Austen or Charles Dickens or somebody from another century, the language they were using was the comfortable contemporary language of that era. And what happens with language is it always moves toward expediency. It's not that we've lost better language, it's that we've moved towards expediency. And so the more we move forward, and you can see it through texting and through Twitter, 144 characters, and all these short form ways, Telegraph before we had Twitter, right? We are always looking for ways to reduce complexity, not enhance it in speech. Now, does that mean we can't write powerfully? Well, of course not. Lots of our most powerful writers write in forms that were completely anathema to the 19th century. If you look at someone like Cormac McCarthy, he literally is exploding the notion that we have to hold on to old styles of punctuation to get the same effect in writing. Well, what will that look like 100 years from now? Will the industry of writers adopt a different way of marking or noting punctuation? I don't know, but we are constantly moving towards efficiency and expediency. And so now the kind of writing that really hooks the attention of a reader is fast-paced. It uses a lot of reference points because we all have a lot of reference points now. And it is trying to drive for holding your attention. It isn't trying to fill up quantities of time. You know, Charles Dickens was trying to expand the amount of words he put in his writing. As we know, he got paid by the word. He was writing in a serial format. There was no television. This was, the Breaking Bad of his day, writing Oliver Twist, A Tale of Two Cities, right? Because he was trying to hold the attention every week and give you just enough information that you'd be on the edge of your seat for the following week's release. But that's not how it is now. We binge watch our shows. We try to get to that part of the information that will give us the best experience. And it isn't tedious, cyclical, long-sounding words, right? It's short, it's snappy. It addresses where we want to go. So the romantic notion of previous eras needs to stop in homeschool. It's a mistaken idea of how language evolves. It's great to read Charles Dickens. We should read Jane Austen. And I absolutely think that if you find Jane Eyre, you will find some of the most powerful, most beautifully written sentences in the English language. Those are the masters from those eras. Reading someone you've never heard of who happened to write in the 19th century doesn't make them a Jane Austen. Just like in our era, we have masters of writing, then we have a lot of writing that it's just not worth preserving. You know, it'll be great for this era, and it won't live up to the standard of high quality literature long term. One of my favorite people to read about this whole subject is E.M. Forrester. He has a tiny little volume whose title I will put in the comments about the novel. And it was a collection of lectures he gave. He didn't write it. He gave them orally, and they are now in this little volume, and I've read it countless times. I'm tired this morning, so my brain is blanking on very basic details like the title of this book. But it is a fantastic way to understand how to read across different centuries. Like, how do we compare a Jane Austen to today's writers? You know, whoever you're reading that is someone that you consider representative of this era, like Ann Tyler, someone like that. How do we read across the era? Sue Monk Kidd. I loved it, and it helped me to start to really understand that when we romanticize the past, we're actually missing the contribution of the present, and we're overvaluing the past. The past isn't inherently more intellectual. It's just, first of all, there were fewer educated people. And secondly, the people who rose to the top in that era are the people that we revere. There were plenty of hacks, just like there are plenty of hacks today. Make sense? Oh yeah, if you've never read Jane Eyre is wonderful. It's long though, and you might find yourself in the weeds occasionally. Some of the language is over the top, but there are, because of her human insight, there are some passages in Jane Eyre that literally give me the chills still when I reread them. They're absolutely beautiful. And really, the insight that I got from this E.M. Forster book was that when we are reading across eras, the issue isn't social context, history, economics, location on the globe. What we're really remembering, and the reason something withstands the test of time, is the insight into human nature. It's why the Odyssey is still going, right? That's why we can read Homer, read Shakespeare, read Antigone. That's why we can read these classic works. Because even though the language sometimes trips us up, the insight into human nature, the insight into the human condition or predicament is so universally felt. And there is this tether that takes us back through time, where we are now aware that we are part of this massive story. And this story has been expressed in these thousands of ways. And each one helps us to become better people, helps us to know ourselves and our communities, right? So that's what's really cool. Thank you, Aspects of the Novel. Thank you, Leanne. It's driving me crazy. Aspects of the Novel by E.M. Forster. Thank you. This is not my morning. My brain is so foggy. So I'm going to sip tea for a moment. Emily says she thinks she needs the audio version of Jane Eyre. I'll tell you the way that my family got into Jane Eyre. I had already read it, but my kids hadn't. And when I turned 40, Jane Eyre was on Broadway. It was produced by the same people who produced Les Miserables. So there is an entire soundtrack of songs from Jane Eyre, from that play. And it was nominated for a Tony, you know, like Best Musical of the Year, but it lost to the producers because that was the huge musical. So Jane Eyre did not make it. It only lasted, I think, a year on Broadway. But the musical is still available. And the songs are great. They're very dramatic. But they are faithful to the text, of the book. So you could actually download those songs or go on YouTube or buy the CD and get to know the music and then read the book. And you might find that that helps bridge a little bit of the dated language, the arcane language. but the musical is incredible and the songs are beautiful, and my kids still quote them to each other and sing them. And when we put it on, they all end up, in big dramatic, emotional musical theater mode, which is really fun. Oh, and then Carrie says the new Jane Eyre movie is great. Her 17-year-old loves it. That's another way. Always watching films helps to take some of the older storylines and bring them to life. I've admitted many times I read no Jane Austen until Colin Firth in Pride and Prejudice. And then I read them all. So, it's okay to read a book after you see the movie. You don't have to read the book first and then see the movie. It's pretty much both of those strategies work. Let's see, who else? What else have you got? Oh, Ashley, you're so sweet. Thank you for saying that. Okay, Janelle says, but are we losing the powerful impact of words by taking a quick route to what we're trying to say? Or do you think we're saying more with fewer words? We are definitely saying more with fewer words as a collective. I mean, I don't know if that's true for each individual person, but when I teach at Xavier, so those of you who don't know, I adjunct as a professor at Xavier University when I have time. This year I did not have time. And when we go through like professor sort of in-service discussion about writing at the college level, and we talk about, well, what are we looking for in our students? What does Xavier hope to put out into the world in terms of writing? We talk about some of this. And what we're looking for in college students who go into the world isn't efficiency of communication versus length. It is effective communication. So we're not necessarily going for short, but we're definitely not going for length for its own sake. What we're looking for is effectiveness. And part of effectiveness is the right language. It's masterful use of the vocabulary of the field. Does that make sense? It's the capacity to take language that is particular to a field and use it for impact, to get across the ideas, to make sure that you are saying what you need to say adequately. Some of the truncated language that we see in texting and Twitter and on blogging is appropriate to those mediums and not appropriate to academic discourse. But then both of those isn't appropriate to novels. So what we're talking about is impact. Twitter is designed for the insight, the quick jab, the profound comparison of ironies, right? That you get a snapshot, just that instant gestalt. The best people on Twitter make you feel like this when you read it. Oh, or oh my gosh, or oh, that is so true, right? Isn't that what you want to get out of Twitter? You're not looking for a treatise. When people like write a blog post on Twitter where it's like 20 tweets to say one idea, that's not really the best use of that medium. The best use of that medium is being able to say something in 144 characters that says the whole thing. Well, that's an art form. It's not easy. That's a challenge. But then that kind of writing doesn't carry over as easily into the research paper, where you have to be thoughtful, you have to be orderly and systematic, and marshal a more advanced or sophisticated vocabulary that might be unfamiliar to you, where you have to learn how to cultivate the kinds of sentences that make that vocabulary clear to a reader. So these are all different ways that people write. There are different ways that we read, and we shouldn't disparage any of them. Yes, sometimes there is a loss of eloquence, is what it appears to us. You know, I'll read the Gettysburg Address with students, and we read it right after I Want a Wife by Judy Brady. And that is this really wonderful little feminist rant from 1971 versus Abraham Lincoln, right, with the Gettysburg Address. We do this in advanced composition in Brave Writer. And the language shift is jarring. You go from this very modern, sarcastic indictment of a patriarchal structure that we're trying to shed in the middle of the 20th century, and then you go backwards in time to the eloquence of Lincoln. But what we do is we deconstruct the rhetoric in both contexts, because they are both masters of rhetoric. And they are exactly on point for the people they're talking to in the era in which they live. That's the goal of good writing. Good writing by Judy Brady, if it had sounded like the Gettysburg Address, no one would have listened. It would have made no impact. So just trying to sound like Abraham Lincoln should not be anyone's goal. It's a great idea to learn what he does, how he does it, in the context in which he lived, so that you can borrow those tools into our era and our language and make the same kind of impact using words that will reach our audience. And that might seem less eloquent, but sometimes the eloquence is just about it being a bygone era. It's not to say that we have somehow, I mean, yes, we definitely have people in our broadcasting world who are not eloquent, but they're not eloquent in our era. It's not because they're not as eloquent as Lincoln. More people have access to a microphone today and to the printed word than in the history of the world. And not all people who have access are skillful orators or writers. But the ones who are stand up in any era, no matter what language they use. So my recommendation then is that when you are working with your kids on books from another era, is to make sure that what they're reading stood up. And just because it was on Charlotte Mason's list doesn't mean it has stood the test of time. And some of the books on your list right now, 100 years from now, would not be good choices for your great-great-great-grandchildren to read because they won't have stood up. Does that make sense? And while you're in your era, enjoy it. You're a contemporary. Enjoy it. Enjoy getting all the jokes. Enjoy all of the cultural touchstones. I mean, that's one of the benefits of reading in your own era. Yes. Yeah, somebody's talking about audiobooks. Audiobooks are wonderful. Audiobooks are wonderful. Heather is bringing up Leon Garfield's Shakespeare stories. I will tell you this, that was my gateway into Shakespeare with my kids. That's a fantastic series, and I highly recommend it. Leon Garfield has a beautiful way with words, and how he incorporates Shakespeare's direct quotes into prose, masterful. Fantastic books. I highly recommend those. Let's see, what else are you guys talking about up here? You know, people do want to read books like Harry Potter before the movies, and I do understand that. One of the benefits in my children's childhood is they read some of the Harry Potter books before the movies came out. And I remember feeling really lucky that we got to read them before the movies were even available, because we could construct in our own imaginations what we thought those kids looked like. And honestly, the Emma Watson, who plays Hermione, as adorable as she is, and as much as I love her as a human being, that is not what my Hermione looked like. And I can still call back to mind who I thought she looked like. I never pictured her being this, you know, little adorable person. I pictured her being a much more garden variety girl, you know? And when the movies came out, I thought, oh, well, shoot, they missed an opportunity. Now we have to use, you know, really cute girl again for the girl role. And it bothered me. So sometimes it's true. Giving your kids a chance to sort of build something in their own minds first is a great idea. It's just with the all-pervasiveness of the movies, you almost can't escape it. You almost need to allow that experience to happen with something else, right? It can't happen in the same way for Harry Potter now, because Harry Potter is everywhere. I mean, how can you not know what they look like before you've seen the movies? They're literally on the covers of the books now. They're everywhere. It's in your face. And the realization of that magical world through the various directors in the films was brilliant. I mean, coming to those movies after having read the books, we were all blown away, because they can realize in detail things my brain didn't take the time to really construct. So that's the benefit of film. On the flip side, however, is that when you create your own magical world when you're reading, there is something really private and personal about your choices. And so other books can do that for kids, because not every book has yet been made into a movie. So just know that. Don't feel too guilty if for some reason you haven't prevented your child from seeing the movie before they read the book, because in some cases it's just not possible. And for some books, it's the movie that helps them even want to read the book. And that's okay too. We're all just talking about the dialogue between different art forms. It's not like there's a right way. Nobody set a rule book of how to read or how to view film. We in Brave Writer really see film as the 20th century's literary contribution to the story of people. We want you to value film. We dedicate online writing classes to the study of film. Nancy Graham, who works for Brave Writer, who will be with me at this British conference this coming week, teaches those classes. She is an MFA in cinema and helps students see the literary value of film. So you know I'm all about movies. So just remember that they are in dialogue with each other, and don't prefer one to the other necessarily. And allow your kids to read some books without movies, so they have that enriching experience of creating their own imagined world. Okay, let's see what else. Anyone else? Yeah, there you go. So Michelle is sharing that her daughter didn't have an interest in Harry Potter till she saw the movies, but that she had to read Hunger Games and Divergent before seeing the movies. And that's another thing to know. Kids have preferences, and it's good to honor those preferences. They are learning how to have taste, how to educate themselves, how to get what they need. And it's okay for them to try some things and change their minds. One of the ways they learn whether they want to read first or watch the movies first is to do both and to see which one they liked better. And that's perfectly valid. You don't have to decide that for them. You can say, well, do you want to try it this way or this way? And then afterwards, well, how do you think that went? Do you like it better this way or this way? I mean, these are great conversations to have. There's no right way, right? We're not policing our children. I saw Brooklyn and I loved it. Yeah, it was beautiful, beautiful movie. My family background is Irish, and so it had that little extra Irish issue for me that I liked. It was beautiful. Okay, well, I'm going to go because I have to pack. I fly out tomorrow, and my floor in that other room is just all clothes. So that's what I'm working on. Like I said, I will be back tomorrow morning at 8, so we'll do this one more time, and then I'll be on the road, and we'll figure out how to do it from England and France. Won't that be wonderful? And I will do the best I can to take pictures and share on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, why aren't you? Instagram's fun. Go to Julie Brave Writer. My ID is at Julie Brave Writer. Okay, if you go to just at Brave Writer, you're going to get some guy who doesn't even speak English. So go to Julie Brave Writer, follow me, and I'll be posting pictures from this amazing 2-week trip. And I'll be staying in touch with you. Yeah, thank you for all those well wishes. We will meet one more time before I get on the plane. And then after that, there we'll go. So have a great day. Live honestly, write bravely, and live what you're good at demonstrably in front of your kids. Involve them in your expertise. Have a great day, everybody.